Something that's always concerned me, and it goes back many, many years ago when George Smitherman was the Minister of Health and Long-Term Care in the provincial government here in Ontario, who said he didn't want to see LGBTQ seniors go back in the closet the minute they retired or the minute they went into long-term care facilities. The Gilbert Centre started a new program just recently called a Seniors Program, where it's going to be effectively, hopefully effective to get long-term care facilities, City of Barrie, to be much more inclusive and diverse when it comes to seniors who are aging, who are going into retirement homes, making them more inclusive, more diverse. And we're hoping to talk about that this evening with my guest, Jason McClellan from the Gilbert Centre. The Gilbert Centre started a new program just recently for seniors who are identified within the LGBTQ community. And this evening I have the gentleman that's heading up this program. His name is Jason McClellan. He's with me for the hour. Welcome.
Hi, Jerry. Thanks very much.
So you moved from a long, far away from here, weren't you? Up north somewhere, like on Gava Bay or?
My last posting was Simcoe Lake, Ontario. So
where's that?
It's right at the top of Ontario, right next to the Manitoba border. You go right to the peak there. It's like right at the top. It's already frozen and snow.
It's snow. So from Simcoe to Barrie.
To Barrie, here we are.
Wow. And what, LGBTQ seniors, not that you're a senior, of course, but, and you did a nice job dyeing your hair to look the part too.
Well, I tried, right? Gotta make everybody comfortable.
Is that how you got the job, by dyeing your hair?
Of course. You know, I hung out in the parking lot, remember?
Okay, well, yes, that too. So, seniors, LGBTQ, 2+, maybe. There's a lot of hype about that lately, and the CBC just did a thing about seniors going back into the closet. And I remember a few years ago, and you're politically savvy, a few years ago when George Smitherman was the Minister of Health and Long-Term Care, many years ago.
So that's more than a few.
Quite a few years ago. He did say he was concerned about the LGBT community as they were aging and going into long-term care facilities, not necessarily in Simcoe or Barrie, but elsewhere, going back into the closet because long-term care facilities will not up to handling the inclusivity and diversity of the gay community. And I think, and I quote, those straight people, this is from Leslie Cam, who was on the CBC interview, said, those straight people who were harassing us and beating us back then are now our ages too, right? Now we are in the same age and in long-term facilities together. So is it a little bit concerned because you're heading up the program? It's a new program with the Gilbert Centre. So where are you coming from when it comes to long-term care and aging and the LGBT community? How do you see this program unfolding?
Well, I think the first part is we've got to identify why LGBT members are actually going back into the closet, or they feel they need to go back into the closet. And I think that's the most important thing. Mm-hmm. So we can kind of address that, whether we're addressing that on a provincial level or a city level or just a long-term care facility or a program. So I think that's really, really important, you know, because as we age, and I mean, I'm only 51. I know it's hard to believe, but I am only 51. But we're
really?
Yeah, I know, it's a shock.
I would have put you younger.
Well, thank you, Jerry. I appreciate that.
50, 49. Sorry.
It's okay. So we have to remember that our generation and older were conditioned that being LGBT was not acceptable. You had to go to school, you got married, you had children, and you lived your life, and then you died, and that was it. But what's happening is as we get older, our either spouse or partners are passing away, or we're getting divorced because we're struggling with sexuality. So you're reliving that whole coming out again as you got older, and now you're in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, and you're doing the exact same thing you were fighting with when you were a teenager. So that's a huge problem in general. And then it's to find those places that you're comfortable doing that. Like being, like, how do you get good healthcare if you can't be honest with your healthcare provider about your whole well-being, which includes sexuality and mental health and physical health. It's health equity that's so important to make sure that you're moving forward, right? So
right. I did do a tenure at managed a seniors residence in just north of Barrie, and one of the things that concerned me was not just the LGBT community, but even couples, male-female couples, were moving into long-term care facilities. Oftentimes were separated. Little to no privacy, as if somehow when you're 80 and 90, somehow your sexual being is gone, and all you're left with is a shell that eats and sleeps, you know. And so that's totally inaccurate.
like you're supposed to stop living all of a sudden because you're getting older.
Or you're moving into long-term care facilities or retirement homes, not just long-term care, and you're suddenly no longer considered a sexual being because you're old.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, you can't do that anymore.
You can't do that anymore. And there's a lot more to sexuality than the physicality of it. I mean, the physicality of it's there, but there's cuddling, there's touching, there's caressing. There's a lot of things that can go on. I remember one couple that moved into a retirement home that I was managing, and they were in their 90s and decided to get married because the kids were totally against it. And I think they were married like a week or something, or not very long anyway. He came into my office and said, well, I'm going to have a penile implant because, you know, and I was completely like, what? And it awoke in my senses of not caring for this couple in the way I should have, because I should have been astute enough to know that, wow, they're in their 90s and they want to be sexually active to the best of their ability, and because he couldn't get an erection, he thought, penile, I never heard of a penile implant. When I told the doctor, he said, really? And then I told my board at the time, and I said, Mr. So-and-so wants to get a penile implant. That means he'll have a partial erection all the time. And one of the board members said, so he'll be going around in a wheelchair with a partial erection? But no, yeah, maybe he will. But the whole point of this was that they were shocked that here's a couple in their 90s wanting to get married, because, as you pointed out earlier, they didn't want the scandal of not being married and being together. And being married would allow them to be in the same room, share the same bed type of thing, right? And if they weren't, so it was a faith-based organization, it wasn't going to happen. So the whole point of this is, with the gay community, they have that challenge plus, right?
Everything else. Well, and for example, I mean, a prime example of that was two partners that were going into long-term care, and this is recent, it was in the headlines, talked about they wanted to be together, but long-term care didn't want them to be together. Their health deteriorates quicker because they're still not living their life. Right. So why would you separate them? And they were married. They were married 50 years, and they were going into long-term care together. So why would you separate them? Based on what? Right. It's not like they're taking up more space. They're sharing the same bed still. Yeah. You know, it's still the same room. And like we said, sexuality or sexual satisfaction doesn't all come from actual intercourse.
Right.
I mean, human touch is an amazing thing. Yeah, you know, exactly. and we all need that because we're human beings, right?
Exactly. So he goes on to say that in this article that many of us are in isolation, many of us are invisible, many of us are afraid because we have been so stigmatized for so many years, and those of us who are 55 years old or 60 plus are still afraid to speak out. And so this is what, you know, like Minister Smitherman at the time had said, they're going back into the closet out of fear of being stigmatized, or in fact being harassed by, and some of them even said by staff in long-term care facilities. We worry about this is another quote from Brian Hobbs, who's 69, we're worried about actual physical harm happening to us, not only from staff, but from other residents. Because remember, those straight people who were arresting us and beating us back then are now our ages, like I quoted earlier. So he's 69, he volunteers for Ottawa Senior Pride, and he runs seminars for staff and volunteers at long-term care facilities on how to treat LGBT seniors. Is that sort of what your program is looking at doing?
Well, we're trying to bridge that gap of understanding of especially with frontline workers. So the idea for me in this program would be to work with frontline workers, to work with the unions and get them educated, so we're more in a safer space. And maybe that's the key, is to getting the unions that work with frontline workers on board in order to get that process to go forward. I do know CUPE is very receptive to training and talking about LGBT issues, HIV. Fred Hand in Ontario is actually one of the most supportive people you ever find. And they're open to that concept, which is hugely important, that they're willing to actually sit down and have that conversation, because some of those on those committees are aware that this is a problem that we need to start addressing and we need to move forward. So I think that's a big step for us as a program, to actually start working with those frontline workers and start bridging those gaps and getting rid of those misconceptions and myths about the LGBT community, that they're people, so let's just treat them like people. They're part of the community, and it's not like they're going anywhere. Yeah. We're everywhere. So I mean, we're everywhere. You know, you've got teenagers to seniors, like, are part of the LGBT community. It's we're doctors, we're lawyers, we're nurses, we're MPs now and MPPs, and well, some.
Right. So you're talking about frontline workers, but there's also those that are the managers and the directors of seniors' residences. Yes.
You mean the old white guys, straight guys that sit on boards and stuff?
Yeah.
Yes.
So CUPE deals with frontline workers, but what about, how do we get, and how are you planning to get into that whole piece around the management, where there's actually managers and boards of directors? I mean, you have to have them. You have to get the buy-in from them, don't you?
You do, and it's a process. So it's a long process. It's even like if you're trying to do political action, you've got to align yourself with people that see what you're seeing, or that they believe in what you're doing, and then you take that approach of working together. That's the most important thing I've always found, whether I'm doing political or working with unions or frontline workers or the LGBT community, is you've got to identify what the root cause of the problem is, come up with a solution together, and then work together to get that solution out there so people can use that. So it takes time. It's not an overnight solution, unfortunately, but we will get to management. I give Soldiers Memorial credit. The CEO is coming to meet with us at the Gilbert Center because he wants the LGBT community to give input on the existing hospital, new hospital, and he wants seeing older LGBT community members to do the same. So that's a step. That's a step in the right direction.
Right. Well, we know here in Barrie, just a couple of weeks ago, when the Lakeside Upper Deck opened here in Barrie, there was a lot of hype about there was a gay bar opening up in town. You know?
Oh my God!
So we see
it's going to sink now in a big sinkhole. Right?
So we see that element is still out there. That stigmatizing, discriminatory element is still out there, and aging, because I think aging as a gay man, myself, aging, it becomes, oftentimes we think it's all youth-centric, you know? So when you're young, you never think about growing old. You never think about being old, and then suddenly you're there, as you might know. But you're not old enough yet, but but does your mother think you're still 12 or something?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay. But we somehow know, because we've seen it, and we sometimes ourselves. I mean, you go on social media sites like Grindr or Scruff or Silver Daddies and Get Beer Forest and all these. And
I don't think anybody's using Silver Daddies very much anymore.
Oh, okay, well, I don't know about that. I'm just thinking about your silver hair. Silver Daddies.
I'm a splendid daddy. I'm not a sugar daddy.
Right.
I can't afford to be
a splendid daddy. What, is a cheap daddy?
Yeah, I can't afford to be a sugar daddy. You have to get the substitute.
Okay, so. But on a lot of those sites, you see profiles that just say, no old people, nobody my dad's age, nobody. So there is already a stigmatizing thing about growing old within the LGBT community. I mean, probably the community that we're talking about, which is the LGBT, is probably more self-stigmatizing than outside of the community. But that kind of rhetoric that you see on social media lingers into the everyday life of gay guys, of the gay community. And so when you look for long-term care facilities, I know in Florida, there was I don't know if it was Fort Lauderdale or south of that, where one gay couple bought a house, and then their friends bought another house, and finally they ended up owning like an enclave, and everybody on the enclave was, for the most part, LGBTQ. And that seemed to be one of the ways of addressing or lessening the stigmatization of the older gay community by, I keep saying guys, but the LGBT community, from sort of like protecting itself and self-advocating so that there is safe spaces for older seniors to go to that are going to be somewhat free from discriminatory practices that we've seen all along. And CBC article attests to that. That's still ongoing because this is just recent. And as I said, George Smitherman addressed it years ago.
Right, right. You know, our former premier is a prime example of an older LGBT member who took a huge amount of hate based on her sexual orientation. Like, it just proves that there's this huge problem in the communities of accepting that. And our own community, our own LGBT community, has that difficulty with age as well. Now, don't get me wrong, when I was 18, I thought like 30 was like ancient, okay? And I get that.
And it was.
And it was.
When you're 18.
You know, but,
yeah, no, exactly.
but yeah. As you get in your 20s, what's wrong with having a conversation with somebody that's older? Maybe just a conversation is going to make their day. You don't have to judge them. Not everybody's trying to get into your pants. I'm sorry to tell you, but you know, that's just the way it is.
No,
like,
exactly.
Like, what's wrong with being social with, or sharing your experiences with somebody that's older, or somebody that's older sharing their experiences with somebody that's younger? That's a huge advantage for somebody growing up in this day and age to find out where you came from, the struggles you went through, the fact that you may have a criminal record because you were gay in Canada, which, you know, still hasn't been pardoned yet. But you know, those are huge issues. And now these people are going into homes facing that were arrested and all this other stuff that happened when they were younger. Now they're going into homes, and it's all the same people again. Right.
The Prime Minister came out maybe a year ago, when he apologized in Parliament for the wrongs against the LGBT community and those that had criminal records because they were gay, like bathhouse raids in the 80s in Toronto and so forth and so on. There's 8,000 of these individuals out there, and only 7 have applied for a pardon, and only 2 have gotten the pardon out of 8,000. And out of the 8,000, 7 have applied, 2 have been pardoned, and the other 5 are somewhere in the system. And I'm thinking, the system, like, and some of these individuals have passed, and so their kids or their relatives are now trying to get the criminal record expunged. I mean, that's Canada, and that's not that long ago. When were the bathhouse raids? In the 70s?
70s, early 80s, I believe.
Early 80s, in Toronto.
Yes. And there's a huge problem with the relationship with the police. They still struggle today. Like, you know, I know they're trying. We recognize they're all trying, but, you know, there's this controversy about police participating in Pride, and you know, I get both sides of the argument, but the older generation has so much experience, and I can't understand why younger LGBT members are not taking advantage of that experience and learning from them, or just spending time with them and finding out, like, hey, you know, here's what you did for our community today. Like, my son's amazing individual, and we had this conversation about him going through school now. And I said, what happens when somebody actually comes out and makes that statement that they're part of the gay community? And he said, everybody looks at them and goes, okay, and are we going to lunch or what? like it was just, it's nothing. But when I was in high school, you didn't talk about being gay. No. And I mean, we didn't talk about anything. And if you did, wow, like, there's things that happened to you. You were beaten up, you were bullied, you went through all kinds of things that you shouldn't have gone through because you're in the part of the LGBT. So almost forced to conform, in the sense that in order to protect yourself from getting beat up, you date girls, or girls date guys if they want to. You know, a lesbian would date a guy and a gay guy would date a girl. Right. Just to they all seem to find each other somehow. I don't ever understood that.
I think growing up, almost every gay guy had a girlfriend that knew, but would fill in. You know, or a lesbian that had a boyfriend that would fill in. You know, and even now in recent years, I remember somebody, a friend of mine. She said, you know, if you ever need a date, I'm available. If you know, to make it. No, you know what? Yeah, okay, thanks, but no thanks, because not everybody's comfortable, right, in their sexuality. How do you see? So it's not just long-term care facilities. It's not just retirement homes, but it's the community in general. Like, Is it safe for older LGBT that identify, that want to come out to walk the streets of Barrie? Is it safe for them in terms of holding hands or showing any kind of affection? Do you think that's going to be part of your battle in terms of bringing a program together that's going to address not just retirement homes and long-term care facilities, but just the overall stigmatization of elderly LGBT folk?
I think it's a huge part of the program. I don't think the program just stays with seniors in long-term care and stuff. I think it's anybody that's younger working towards their retirement. I mean, you could be 30 trying to figure out your whole, how you're moving forward in life or whatever the case may be. So there's really no limits on the program. The program, the idea is to figure out those root causes of problems and try to address them and bridge those gaps so people can feel comfortable in their own skin no matter where they are, or no matter what age they are, what part of the LGBT, or if they're straight or whatever the case may be. Like, there's nothing wrong with two guys holding hand or two women. I mean, Europe does it all the time and nobody bats an eye. So why we have so much trouble in Canada with this? You know, I watched on Church Street over the summer. I had a friend here from Newfoundland, and we were on Church Street having dinner, and we watched this whole thing transpire where two guys were showing affection by holding hands and just talking to each other at one of the bars on the patio. And a fellow walked by, and they were older, they must have been about their 50s, got really upset by that whole scene that he was saying. And this was on Church Street, so
the gay village.
The gay village. So I was really kind of wondering, like, you know, maybe the rainbow sidewalks would have given it away that this might happen, but...
Or the rainbow flags on the signposts on every corner.
They weren't doing anything out of the ordinary that any other couple wouldn't do, but he ended up throwing a sign at them and yelling all kinds of things. The police ended up arresting them and then threatening them with stabbing them with needles and stuff. Like, it was this whole scene just because two older guys held hands and were talking in a restaurant on a patio. That just can't happen. And you think we're advanced compared to some places. And then you see something like that and you go, geez, do people really wonder why we have pride? Like, that's a prime example of why. The premier's hate that she got is another prime example of why we have pride, or we need to start addressing these things, especially as we get older.
I heard that from the previous MPP here in Barrie, Ann Hogarth, who had said to me, prior to the recent election in May, you would be shocked at some of the emails and the rhetoric that Premier Wynne at the time was getting daily, not just once in a while, but daily emails and phone calls and anonymous phone calls left on their voicemail about the fact that she was a lesbian and threatening her and her family and their kids.
Right, right.
And you wonder why they have security detail, because they need to protect not just themselves, but they need to protect their family.
Right.
Their family is even at risk. Their kids are at risk. Their kids going to school get harassed. You know, and you wonder, my goodness, this is what public life is about.
Yeah, that doesn't make you want to get into politics, that's for sure. Right.
Well, it doesn't, and you're constantly on guard and always looking over your. I don't know. I'm not Kathleen Wynne, but I mean, you know, even though you have security detail, people with security detail still get harassed publicly. You know,
and I had the pleasure of actually.
Well, you worked with Kathleen Wynne, didn't you?
I'm not a supporter. But I also believe in resolving problems, and I believe that we have to work with whoever's in office. It doesn't make a difference if it's Doug Ford, Premier Wynne, or Tim Hudak, or whoever, or Andrea Horwath. It doesn't really matter who's in office. You got to be able to work with whoever, but the key is to find them so they listen to you and they actually sit down and have a conversation. And then Kathleen Wynne, on a personal level, was incredible to me. Like, very personable, very outgoing, very willing to listen. We went in for a half-an-hour meeting and we were talking about HIV and aging and LGBT, and there was a bunch of people living with HIV there talking about their lived experiences and what's actually going on now today, the stigma and everything. And Kathleen Wynne actually made the ambassador to Japan wait an extra 45 minutes while she continued to talk to us.
Nice.
You know,
that's good. That's good.
But Kathleen Wynne even said at the end of the conversation, when I said, you know, here's an opportunity to end HIV in Ontario, she actually said, I totally agree with that, and that's something we need to work towards, and I've never thought of it in that sense of what's going on now. So it just goes to show you that when you can sit down and you can present a good position and an idea, and if they're willing to listen, you can work with your politicians, no matter what their affiliation is, to move forward for the betterment of everybody. And hopefully, we're hoping in January to kind of have a round table kind of conversation. We're going to invite some policymakers from the Premier's office and some frontline workers and some LGBT community members that are aging. And we're going to include younger people as well, to kind of have this conversation about aging as an LGBT member, and kind of identify those barriers that we're going into and how we come up with solutions. And then hopefully we'll have that sit down later on with whether the Minister of Health or whoever, and kind of bring that forward with them and let them meet some of the people that are participating so they get the idea. So there's a face to this, not just numbers on a paper,
right. Because
we're dealing with people's lives, and that's the most important thing. And people forget when you just show up on a piece of paper, there's no personal interaction, and people forget that. So that's why it's so important that people tell their life experience stories, especially to our leaders, our political leaders.
Barrie City Council is new. I mean, there's some that were successful. The mayor, congratulations again to the mayor. He's coming back for his third term, I believe. But the thing is, how involved would the city of Barrie be in terms of enacting some kind of city bylaws that protects the LGBT community, especially those that are older, like yourself?
Jeez, I'm really 21, come on.
And I remember a few years ago, somebody was saying, you know, there should be sidewalks that have dips in it for seniors with walkers and that kind of thing, because it was a lot easier, and wheelchairs, accessibility, and doors that you press a button and the doors open, and things like that. And I'm just wondering, are you looking at getting the city of Barrie involved at all in your programming in terms of lobbying for better protection or better accessibility for seniors, LGBT particular?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll meet with the mayor or city council anytime,
right.
To talk about this and aging, whether it's an HIV issue or LGBT issue. It doesn't matter. It's about making it better for everybody. That's all it is. And I'm not talking just about the city of Barrie. We're talking about like our MPs and our MPPs, because we have to work together to solve this problem. And Bruce Stanton, who I met a few weeks ago, was very interested in the program, because he said, this is something we really need to start addressing, because it is a problem, and we want to make sure that we're addressing that. So, I mean, there's an example of somebody that's going out of their way to kind of look at this, and that stemmed from Jill Dunlop and Bruce Stanton organizing a Seniors Day, which a bunch of different programs got together. We were there for the community came in, was able to talk to the different programs and figure things out, and I was actually able to talk to a whole bunch of other programs while I was there, so it was actually really convenient. Yeah. We should do that more often.
Yeah. One thing I noticed too with the seniors is that we have to self-advocate, and if we don't, so many are isolated, and I read that clip, they do feel isolated, but a lot of seniors, whether they're identifying within the LGBT community or not, they go into long-term care facilities or retirement homes, and they are more or less abandoned by family, and mom and dad's or mom's in there or dad's in there, so the isolation piece is there anyway. Much more so when programming and you don't see yourself has somebody. I think the quote said that they were invisible. They felt invisible. And one thing, there's a myth about the LGBT community that a lot of people who aren't in the LGBT think it's always about sex. When you look at people that are out, I'm thinking of people like Elton John, who's in his 70s. He's in his 70s.
That's right, yeah.
And he's still entertaining, and he's been out for years and years and years and years. And he's very comfortable in his own skin. And David Furnish, his husband, who is from Toronto, they're very comfortable, and they've got lots of money, but not everybody's in that wonderful position to have mansions in England and homes in Toronto and New York. And how do you see us as growing older in terms of, are we looking for champions? You're a champion now. Are there other champions in Simcoe County that you're aware of since you moved from, where was it again? Shuckalock Bay or Satchico Bay? Satchico Lake. Yeah. You see other champions here?
There are champions, and it's a matter of just finding them, and usually that's just networking through a bunch of different people and figuring that out.
Right.
But eventually you find them, and like, I think everybody should be having sex personally. It doesn't, you know, or we should all, at least by yourself if you have to, but you know, you should, because it's part of your human, you're human, it's humanity, it's your well-being, it's, you know, I had doctors that said, you should masturbate, and it's like, what?
At my age?
My age, are you sure?
I might have a heart attack.
But, you know, but it is about people like myself or you or whoever getting out there and actually starting to speak, you know, so people hear you. You know, one voice is great, but when you can have 10 voices, it's better.
Right.
Because that's when you start making impacts. That's why it's really important to align with other organizations or service providers. And I give Barry credit. There's Jessica from the Rec Center who has a 55-plus program, and she's really trying to include seniors and giving them the opportunity to socialize, get together, go to dances, or whatever the case may be. And our discussion has been, how do we know that older LGBT members are feeling comfortable enough to actually be there?
Right.
And then how do we know that the other seniors are going to accept them? Because we have to remember, this is a generation that grew up together, and there was a whole lot of stuff that went on in school as we grew up, you know, when we were supposed to be married and having kids and buying houses and 2.5 kids or something. I don't remember what it was.
Now it's even less, probably 3/4.
I personally don't want any, but that's...
You just said you had a son.
I do, well.
Well, I hope he's not watching because...
Oh, I love him to death. I wouldn't give him back, but...
Dad was on TV saying,
I didn't want him.
I don't want kids.
You know, I'm very proud of him and who he's become, because... But I look at my parents, too, who are in their 70s now. My mom is a young 45-year-old woman who is vibrant. You would not know she's 72 by any means.
Right.
She takes care of herself. She's out. She does things. She volunteers. She's busy. And her makeup and everything, she has taken very good care of herself. Whenever I've traveled with her, everybody actually refers to her as my wife.
We're going to go to break, and we'll be right back with Jason McClellan from the Gilbert Center. We're back with Jason McClellan, who is the Senior Program Coordinator for the Gilbert Center for Social and Sports Services here in Barrie. And we were talking before we went to break about all the challenges that we're having as seniors. So I will include myself in that.
Oh, finally. Oh, good.
Finally. It took half the show for me to finally admit it. I have a senior.
We should get a couch. Maybe you can tell me all your life's problems.
There's not enough time. Part of your program, too, I understand from what you told me prior to coming on air, was that you're also going to work with youth.
That's right.
So it's like an intergenerational piece to the program, that you're going to bring seniors to the youth, or the youth to the seniors. Are you going to house this at the Gilbert Center, or how's this going to happen? Or how do you envision it happening is more I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, no
your
pressure.
Boss may be watching.
My boss could be watching.
So you don't want your boss to know that you don't know what the heck you're doing.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time I faked it, but anyway, that's another story altogether. There is a goal to actually bring youth LGBT together with an older LGBT group. But it's to identify some things that are still the same. So, but also identify the things that have changed. So whether you're young and you're able to come out in school and nobody bats an eye, but you need to understand that you've got that, I want to say privilege, but that's not quite the right word. You've got that opportunity to come out in a safe environment because of the older generation fought for that right for you to do that. Right. So, and it's important for you to understand that. And then it's important for an older group like ourselves to understand what a younger group is actually facing nowadays, so we can help them, because it's still the same battle. We all just want equality. We just want to be treated as people. So, but then it's also to acknowledge the accomplishments that have all taken place, which is really important, because you do need to celebrate a little bit, you know, and of where we were and where we are. At least nobody's being arrested anymore, and you know, that's progress.
Well, that we know about.
Well, that we know about anyway, yeah.
One thing that's interesting is I find as I grow older, I mean, my kids are all in their 30s now. No, my son isn't in his 30s yet. Almost. I think he's 29 this year.
I thought my life was over at 30, so it's so good.
No, it's over at 51.
Apparently.
Anyway, so the point I'm making here is that my youngest, one of my younger grandsons, who's 2 or almost 3, will be 3 next month in December, threw a 2-year-old tantrum, and I thought, oh, so they're still doing that. They still have tantrums.
I know some adults that still do that. So
yeah. The point I'm making is that some things are hereditary. I mean, we just keep doing the 2-year-olds still have tantrums. Senility still does occur in some of us that are growing older. So some things aren't changing. But in your view, and I know you just started this program, do you think youth are more accepting of the aging process than, say, our generation, who, as I agree with you, I thought at one point, if I only make it to 21, then I'll be independent. And then I started going, I don't want to be 30, I don't want to be 40. And suddenly you're in your 60s or 70s, and you're there. And when you're 18, or when you're 17, or when you're 16, it seems forever, you know, like summertime between the end of school in June till they started school in September seemed like forever. Now June to September, as your age goes, where'd the winter tires? You know, that kind of thing. My son is a constant reminder of that, because, you know, it's funny, because I remember him when he was 3 or 4 or 5, and then all of a sudden now he's 23, and he's graduating from university, and I'm looking at it going, what happened? You know, where did that time go? Because it was a blink of an eye. And you know, when I was younger, and I thought 30 was like the end of life, because it seemed that when I turned 30, and my ex-wife at the time, yes, I was married, threw a surprise party for me for my 30th. And I was having this midlife crisis of turning 30, which the surprise party did not help in any way whatsoever. Right. But then it's when you start getting older that you start realizing that there's nothing stopping you from living your life. Exactly. And
there's nothing standing in your way, except if you let them stand in your way. Yeah. Yeah. You can go skydiving, you can go dancing. I mean, Mary, who lives in North Bay, is on a pride committee up there, is 71 years old, and a lesbian with her partner for 30 years, and can outdance the 20-year-olds in a nightclub. I know that because I went.
and I sat on the sidelines.
I collected tickets, you know, in my wheelchair and stuff. So, you know, my walker, because that's what everybody thought I should have had. But this person who's 71 years old, lesbian, was still on the dance floor the last song of the night at 2:30 in the morning. Still dancing like she was 18, which is amazing, which just goes to show you're as young as you feel. So why would you deny somebody to live their life even if they're in their 70s.
Yeah.
Why would you deny who they are if they're older? Like if you wanted to wear a dress and you had Alzheimer's and you were more comfortable and you were more calm in a dress, but it wasn't fitting the proper behavior as a long-term care facility, why would you want to aggravate that person by making him conform to your beliefs or your rules instead of just letting him wear a dress? I mean, like I said to the staff, I said, what did you think was going to happen? You were suddenly going to go home and start cross-dressing or something? Like you were going to catch it? Like, you know, why can't you just let this person be who they are so they're comfortable and they live with dignity and they're able to be confident in who they are?
Some of my heroines, or heroes, but heroines anyway, like I think of Hazel McCallion, who was mayor of Mississauga.
Right, amazing.
She went in at 59 years old and was mayor till what, she was 92, 93. You know, you look at, and very successful as a politician. And had personal life struggles. I think her husband had some health concerns and everything. And then I think of the Queen of England, who's been waving for what, 70 years almost.
That's her job.
That's her job to wave. But there's an older person, not within the LGBT, but nonetheless there's an older person who is active, who's been active at doing the work that she does, and her husband, even though now he's retired in his 90s.
So she advises world leaders. Like this 7-year-old woman advises world leaders on government policies and experience, and like that says something right there. And they listen to her. You know, I think that is a big statement right there.
We have a culture, unlike other cultures, for example, the indigenous culture, the Asian culture, who respect older folks, who have a sense of understanding that older folks bring a lot of wisdom, have lived, by virtue of living, they collect wisdom whether they want to or not. They've lived long enough, they've seen enough. Not so much in the LGBT community. We seem to disc the older gay, lesbian, trans, queer, questioning, whatever you want to, however you break down that acronym. We seem to think that once you're no longer six-pack abs, and once you're no longer, and if you're balding and wrinkles start to come in and everything starts to drop, you're like, really? What do you know, like, really? You know?
It is true. I find, you know, I'm part of the LGBT community, and I find we are our worst enemy sometimes.
Yeah.
And we judge ourselves very harshly.
Yeah.
I mean, don't be outside the community and criticize because you're like, I mean, they'll hunt you down kind of thing. But we are very difficult on the inside of the community. If you're older and you don't have that six-pack, I mean, or you have that keg going on kind of thing. But that
daddy bod, I think it's called.
Yeah, daddy bod, you know.
Or in some cases, the grandpa bod.
Yeah, you know, and things are sagging, and you're going, how did that get where that is? And you know, we were talking about the Golden Girls. Remember, they made fun of all that stuff because it's just a natural process.
I don't know so much. Yeah, I agree. They made fun, but it's also, and I wanted to touch base on you with that. It's also having a sense of humor, like be able to look at yourself and what is the word? I remember asking you when you make fun of yourself, you're able to not make fun of yourself, but you're able to look at the humor. Suddenly, I have to sit down to tie my shoes.
Or I got to write something down. Well, look at me this morning.
Or you've got a bar. Look at this morning.
Tell me
what happened this morning.
So I get up. I'm actually staying at my parents' cottage before I'm able to move into Barrie on November 1st. But I drove 20 minutes down the road before I realized I forgot to lock the door.
But that can happen at any age, right?
Right, but that never
we take it more personal.
After I turned around the car and I started laughing, going, look at me, wow, this is great.
And I'm going to be on a show talking about aging.
This is great, we could use this. But you know, and I admit, when I was in my 20s, I didn't write anything down because I could remember, you know, when I became a GM of a company, I never wrote down my appointments. It used to scare people because I could remember where everything was. And now if I don't write it down, I'm just like, but I'm not so focused on that. I'm focused on living my life now, which I think is what more people do as we get older, because we realize we want to have a life. We want to have that partner, or we want to be social. We want to, go do things or see the world. And I mean, I've seen some amazing things in my life. Like, I mean, I've been to the Arctic. I mean, how many people can say that?
Not me.
Yeah, it's -70. It's great.
The thing too is that you know, we hear things like, "I'm having a seniors moment," you know, but young people sometimes fail to realize that young people have eyesight problems, have hearing problems. Young people do get things like cancer. Young people do have struggles, physical struggles, mental health issues, as much as seniors do. But when you're older, you attribute, oh, it's the aging process. I always remind myself that at any age, anything can happen to anybody. You can have eyesight problems, hearing problems. You can get young people have heart attacks. You know, I used to think if I make it to 21, I don't have to worry about anything until I'm at least, you know, into my 70s. Because how many of us when we're younger know people our own age that have difficulties? You know.
Oh, it's common.
Yeah.
I mean, like, how many older people get together, we discuss our ailments for just to compare. It's like, what medication are you on? Oh, I'm taking this for that.
I go to the drug mart all the time to get my drugs.
Yeah, so
it's Tuesdays, it's senior discount day. But you know what? It's the humor of it is that embracing it and accepting it is a lot easier to deal with some of the struggles. It's when you're fighting it and you're constantly fighting the fact that you don't want to be 70 or you don't want to be 60. The fact is, embrace it and live it.
Well, I don't need some young 20-year-old twink guy reminding me that I got gray hair. I see it every morning, you know, because my eyesight's still good. You know, but you know,
I notice you're not wearing glasses. So that's good.
Yeah.
Who are you?
Right. We've met, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't need to be reminded of those things. You know, if you're not interested, all you got to say is, I'm just not interested, but thank you, and move on.
Well, there's always young guys that are going to be attracted to older men because of money, right? I mean,
well, it's not me then.
It's not me either. What's below Splenda? Like Twix or what is it? No sugar.
You got to chew on the sugar cane, I think.
No sugar in my life. You know, so I know that. I mean, and there's been a few occasions in my life where somebody, you know, said, "Oh, you drive a nice car." I know. What kind of, you know, like, no. So that's always going to be
that's
there.
A hard no, like no.
Ain't happening. But that's not just in the LGBT community. That's seniors in general. Seniors in general have always been, not always been, but you know, some of them have been scammed for money, even by their own kids.
The romance scandal online now is a huge thing, well, especially in the LGBT community.
I think even within well-known families like the Stronach family, I think the father is taking Belinda Stronach to court for somehow spending money or taking money or doing something. So it's not just the LGBT community, but the LGBT community in the sense has all of that plus the stigmatization of not just being old, but being gay and older.
Right.
And so with the youth, do you hope, because I'm getting back to the youth again, do you hope that bridging that gap will somehow help, bringing youth with seniors and talking about mutual issues that they both share, but they both share, like financial issues or acceptance? Because some youth, you have to wonder with some of the hardware that they wear. You know, when goth was a big thing, my son went through a goth period and I kept thinking, you know, you're beginning to look like an Undertaker. All doom and gloom and all in black and black, you know, black everything. And you go, wow, this is like you're 19 and you're going around like a sad sack, like in this black movie. And I realize it's a look.
Right.
But can you imagine a 90-year-old with that look?
I can, actually. And
okay.
That's okay. But you know what? It's accepting that's for who it was and,
yes.
and who they are at the time, and not judging them based on their look. And I actually watched Dale from the Safer Space program talk about that. Don't make all those assumptions just because someone looks a certain way, because you don't actually know anything about them, and we do that, and we are human. We base our opinions on what we see, and we make we snap judgment on somebody and what they're doing. But I think it's really important to start bridging the gap between the youth and the older, to start becoming more of a stronger community, because if we're not united, we're going to be divided, and if we're divided, we lose.
I have a great story to tell you because it was so funny. I was coming along Dunlop, heading left and up to Mulcaster. I know you're not familiar, and then left again onto Collier Street, heading to City Hall or somewhere along that area. And there was all I saw was this white hair in front of me, and the light was green. The arrow was
wasn't
green.
me, right?
No, it wasn't you. More hair than you.
Okay.
And it was a woman, as it turns out. And then the light was green, and she wasn't turning fast. And I thought, toot, toot, toot. Then she turns. And then she goes, oh, just my luck. She's going onto Collier Street. She turns again, and toot, toot, toot. The light's green, go. The arrow's green, go, go. And then I pulled up beside her. She gave me the finger. I rolled down the window. She goes, meh, gives me the finger, and I went, ah! And then I thought, good for her. She's not. There's an older person that she's not gonna take it.
Yeah, she's not going to take
she's
it
not
from
gonna
anybody.
take my gum. Yeah, you want trouble? But I thought, wow. So she is definitely comfortable in her skin, and she thought, I don't know what she thought, but she just.
Oh, I can tell you what she thought.
After she gave me the finger, I chuckled to myself, going, okay. So some of these seniors, you got to be careful.
I mean, it was just like I was telling you before the break. My mom, who's 72, you wouldn't know it. I mean, when we travel together, or we just suddenly take a road trip out of nowhere, we go for groceries and end up in Montreal. That actually did happen. My stepfather was like wondering where we were, but anyway. When we do things together, everybody asks if she's my wife, and I'm always saying, now there's two ways I can take this conversation.
Take it the way makes your mother look good.
My mom's really young looking, or I'm really old looking. So what is it? So like, let's.
Probably your mom is young.
Yeah,
looking.
that's what it is, because she does look. Yeah. She's 45, right? Yeah. So, but it's no different than going to the restaurant and you get a meal, and they put a senior's discount on it.
My mother was 69 and she mooned at a family reunion. She mooned.
That's awesome.
Everybody. I don't know if she had a few gin tonics or a lot of gin tonics. I wasn't there because my son had been born like 2 weeks before the family reunion. And all I remember. So you missed
your mom mooning everybody.
And I got a phone call from my sister and said, okay, so here's the picture. So she sent me the picture.
Of your mom mooning.
I thought my mom mooning. And I thought maybe like it was like her pants fell or something. Like it was a malfunction, wardrobe malfunction. No, mom mooned everybody. And I went, oh, Jill, 69 years old.
Maybe she had that need that she felt she needed to moon somebody.
She didn't look 69. My mother did not age well, but mentally and emotionally, she was very young at heart, and part of it is because she was always like that. She's passed away now, but she was always like that. Very much, not denying aging, but outgoing and very much a personality in our family. And so, it's not that she didn't want to be old. I remember my father saying to her when he was graying, and my mother, he said, "You have to stop dyeing your hair because you're getting old too." And my mother said, "Okay, fine." But my mother came out with salt and pepper hair. My father lost his hair.
See, and that's the thing, that most people would think that they were in that age. They should be. Aren't you supposed to be sitting on your rocking chair, drinking tea or something, and waiting to die? Aren't you supposed to be doing that now? Yeah. No, you're not supposed to be mooning the family and having a good time and living your life and spending time with grandchildren and doing things and going on roller coasters and. Well,
I remember, or you shouldn't have long hair as an older woman. You should have shorter hair. It's easier to keep. You shouldn't wear skirts or dresses that come above your knees. And men shouldn't wear. Do you remember older guys? Like in their, maybe you don't, 40 and 50s. I remember them in the 70s, where it was very fashionable to have your shirt open up down to here and medallions on, and the guys were in their 50s going, what is this? Like, trying to look like you're 30. I think there's a point where, as seniors, you don't want to wear some tight jeans and you don't want to wear some tight skirts or whatever, but you do want to wear what you feel comfortable in. And you want to wear, I see some within the LGBT community, some men and women and trans women who look absolutely, and trans males who look absolutely beautiful. They dress, they're very much in tune with who they are and their body, and they dress accordingly. And it's great to see it. And they're not conforming, they're conforming to the sense of, this is who I am, and this is how I like to dress, and this is the way I've always dressed. And And so they keep doing it.
And you know, the way people dress can give you a whole lot of confidence.
Yeah, look at the way you're dressed. Very like your
My prison
socks. They're blue and your great shoes. I've got turkey socks. Chicken socks.
I thought that was a rooster, and I'm using rooster.
Okay, rooster. It's a rooster.
Of the other name.
Okay, it's a rooster, but
confidence is a huge part of this, right? So you have, if you feel confident wearing a dress, wear a dress.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if that's who you are and who you want to be, then do it. There should be nobody in the world saying that you can't do that, because what's wrong with it? Nothing. Yeah. Look at, and you know, when we were talking about gender neutral washrooms, everybody's going, oh my God, the sexual assaults will all go up. Where are they? We have gender neutral washrooms now. I don't see anybody being sexually assaulted anywhere. Like what? Like just the assumptions that were made, like, is incredible to me.
Well, the adage that, for example, midlife crisis.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Yeah, me too. Been over it. Made it.
Got tattooed, got a whole bunch of things done.
Got the nipple rings.
Got it.
The nipple rings are gone now. Okay, did it.
They were just too itchy.
Hook onto everything.
Right.
You see an older couple in a sports car. Oh, look at them. Look at them, you know, that kind of thing. Because they're trying to be young. They're not trying to be young. They like driving a sports car, and they can afford it. And that's the beauty of it. Jason, it's been an absolute delight having you on the show.
That's been great. I very much enjoyed it.
And I know there's much more that we can get into, and time won't allow it. I mean, but you must come back.
I'll come back anytime you like.
And once you get your program more in place, and tell us about some of the excitement that you're doing and some of the work that you're doing. But congratulations again on the job. And we look forward to hearing more about the seniors program at the Gilbert Center. And when are you moving to Barrie?
November 1st, I will officially be in Barrie.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Next week, Keenan Allen, the new Barrie City Councillor for Ward 2, is going to be on my show. And we're going to talk about how he likes being a city councillor after about 2 weeks, and the fact that he's an out gay guy and in support of a lot of things for the gay community. So we hope to see that happening at Barrie City Council. So stay tuned for next week with Keenan Allen. Thank you. Thanks again.